Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time of day it is, I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is the continuation of Cooking the Books. Yeah, okay. All right, so after that tasty treat of the Calvert Papers, we're going to hop right back into this thing with William Hepworth Dixon, and to see what the gatekeepers at Wikipedia had to say about this gatekeeper, right? And so it says here that he was born on the 30th of June, 1821. And now just think about the 3s and 6s and 9s you can get out of that, right? And that he was an English historian and traveler. All right, so he's English, right? He's not even American, right? Which puts a whole new spin on the quote that he puts at the beginning of his book. My country's genius walks in another world. Whose country's genius? It's England, right? What's the other world? Is it the New World? Right? Is it America? Right? I mean, that's absolutely amazing, right? Right? But also that his father was this Abner Dixon of Holmfirth. And now you may remember that Holmfirth is the very first Hollywood. And so I cannot believe that that's a coincidence, right? That William Hepworth Dixon's father here was born in Holmfirth, even though he's actually raised in this place called Over Darwin. And it has lots of towers like this. And this one is actually called the Jubilee Tower in celebration of the Queen Victoria's Jubilee. And I think that's what the narrative tells us this one was built for. And there's a lot of very interesting things about Darwin, but I have to save those for another time or this video will never end. And also because Hepworth doesn't really stay here very long, right? Because by the tender age of 25 in 1846, right, he decides on a literary career, right? And I think it's absolutely amazing how many of these figures like Dixon and Poe and so many others have the luxury to just decide on a career. I mean, they just get to decide to be writers or start a bank or a railroad company, right? I wish I could just decide to start a bank tomorrow. Right? But Dixon here, he takes his friend's advice, on this writing career, and he moves to London, where he enters the Intertemple Law School at Oxford. Right? And it takes him 8 years, but he's finally admitted to the bar in 1854, but he never practices law, which is another kind of common thread, right? But it's here where his story starts to get really crazy, right? Because in about 1850, right, in the middle of him being in law school, right, in the middle of him writing and researching the most exhaustive biography on William Penn, right, he is tapped to be deputy commissioner for the Great Exhibition of 1851, right? And he helped start more than 100 out of the 300 committees formed to get this thing off the ground. I mean, are you kidding me? That's over a third of them, right? Or 33.33% for those of you playing the percentage game at home, right? This is absolutely incredible, right? And I'm not going to go too deep into the Great Exhibition of 1851. There's so many great channels and so many great videos out there on this topic, but what was really happening, the purpose of these exhibitions was the beginning of the indoctrination program for society into the modern technological world, and so creating society as we know it today starts with these exhibitions, right? I mean, it's introduced to us. But one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, that in its just over 6-month run, it had just over 6 million visitors, right? And the population of England and Wales at the time was just about 18 million, or so roughly a third of the population total of England and Wales at the time went to this thing, which I think is, may or may not be coincidental. But the question I have is how? How is Dixon able to juggle all of these things, right? The law school and the biography and forming 100 committees for this great exhibition at a time when he doesn't even have access to the basic luxury of a typewriter, which isn't invented until 1872. Like, all of this stuff would have had to been done by hand. I mean, where did he find the time? It just boggles my mind at the things that they say these people achieved. Not to say that they did or didn't, or, I don't know, but it just seems amazing, the amount of things these people do, especially this guy. Because let's just take a look at his career a little bit. I mean, this guy is unbelievable, right? And so apparently, after the Great Exhibition, he goes on his extended European tour, right? And in January of 1853, he comes back to become editor of this Athenaeum magazine, I guess, right? And to which he had been a contributor already for some years, right? Because he just decided to be a writer, right? And he remains its editor until 1869. So that's 16 years. I mean, that's a long run for an editor, right? The influence you could have in literary circles with that kind of run, right? But think about this. Look at the way he travels, too, throughout this time. In 1861, he goes to Portugal, Spain, Morocco, right? In 1863, travels to the east, meaning like China and places out that way, right? And on his return, he just so happens to stop in the Middle East, and he helps found the Palestine Exploration Fund, right? Where he was an active member of the executive committee and eventually its chairman. And so, I wonder, what the Palestinian Exploration Fund was paying for, really, right? And again, furthering these Zionistic tendencies that the story has. I mean, it's just unbelievable, right? In 1866, he travels to the U.S., and he goes as far west as Salt Lake City. And so at the same time, he's editing this magazine. How is that possible? Right? During this tour, he discovers a collection of state papers originally in Irish in the public library at Philadelphia. Right? They had been missing since the time of James II. And on Dixon's suggestion, they were given to the British government. Think about this for just a second. Right? James II, that's 1680s. That's that same period we're talking about here with Penn colonizing Pennsylvania and what was happening with the Shaftesbury's in the Carolina and the Calverts in Maryland. And right. And so he finds these state papers in Irish. And so I can only imagine Dixon's sense of dumb luck when he finds these things, right? He's like, oh my God, what are these doing here? Would you guys mind being good blokes and sending these over to England? They don't really have anything to do with America. Okay. I can only imagine that being the exchange with whoever was at the public library in Philadelphia that day. Really unbelievable. I can only imagine what those papers contained. And so he continues to travel. He travels to the Baltic regions and then into Russia. And you should check out his bibliography is endless. The man wrote 1 million books. He traveled everywhere. And through all of these travels, I really get a sense that there's more going on here. And there's some deep diplomatic things going on because whereas in 1872, he was created a Knight Commander of the Crown by Kaiser Wilhelm I. Hey, there he is. Hail Kaiser. Hey, this is unbelievable. And of course, the German royal families and the English royal families are all the same family. And anyway, right? He even gets back to the United States, as he gets older, and he travels back to Italy and Germany. He is everywhere. He's like savoir-faire. That's who he is. Savoir-faire is everywhere. That's unbelievable. All right, let's see. And so not only is he this traveler, not only does he do all of this stuff, right? He's also involved in the education efforts of the Lords Shaftesbury. So even a further connection with Dixon and the Shaftesburys, right? They were probably really close because he helps establish the Shaftesbury Park Estate, which is, it's essentially the Shaftesburys have schools for wayward children and orphan schools and things like that, which is part of what the Shaftesbury Park Estate was all about, right? And Dixon is also a member of the very first school board for London, 1870, right? In the first 3 years of the school board's existence, Dixon's labors were extensive. I bet they were. Right? And he succeeds in carrying out a resolution which thenceforth established military drill and in all rate-paid schools in the metropolis. Raising good little soldiers. Right? So I have no doubt, making all of these connections here, that Dixon and the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, Anthony Ashley Cooper here, were very, very tight. Right? And to continue on with, the types of things, the knowledge that we have today, and how much of it may have come from William Dixon here, right? In 1854, the year he graduates from the Inner Temple, right? He begins researching who? Francis Bacon, right? And that he is given leave to inspect the state papers until then jealously guarded from the general view by successive secretaries of the state, right? And he published articles criticizing previous biographies of Francis Bacon, right? And publishes an extensive biography of his own. And so just think about how much of what we may know today about Francis Bacon comes from William Hepworth Dixon's access to these state papers. Although it does say here at the bottom that Dixon's books on Bacon have not been valued by scholars. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe they contain a little too much of something. I don't know. And here he is, right? Mr. Top Hat himself, right? The Right Honorable, right? The Viscount St. Alban, right? Who knows? Who's to say? So much is made of Francis Bacon, but how much do we really know? And what are the sources? The same sources that came up with the pen papers too, I don't know. And he also wrote biographies on the first two wives of Henry VIII, right? Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn. And Anne Boleyn is an important part of the Mud City Paradigm puzzle tree. And so we get a lot of information about these two women here and their story, and of Henry VIII. Because it's Henry VIII who really sort of kicks off this whole story with his decision that he cannot be married to this woman, right? And so the Pope won't let him get a divorce, so he declares himself the head of the English Church. And what this does is create the whole divine right to rule aspect of the monarchy in England, right? And that's a major, major part of the storyline. But it's just amazing to me that so much of what's in our history books, on the high school and even basic collegiate level could just be material copied from this guy. Because let's take a look at some of the societies that he belonged to, right? He was a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society and of the Society of Antiquities of London. And, I've talked a little bit about them, and these are the precursors to what archaeology departments would be today, right? And he's a member of the Pennsylvania Society. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like the Pennsylvania Society, but he's a Brit. What was the Pennsylvania Society? Right? And so what this Pennsylvania Society is, right, is essentially it's an old boys club, right, in New York for very rich Pennsylvania businessmen who have to be in New York for their business, right? And they gather together so they can have their say in what's happening in Pennsylvania while they're not there, right? That's how this thing sort of starts. And the really interesting thing about this is that it says that it was inaugurated in 1899. But the amazing thing about this story, as with Dixon here, and as with so many figures like his, he kind of meets a rather tragic end. He dies rather broke and nursing a broken shoulder bone after falling off a horse. And this is in December 1879. So how is it? How can he be a member of the Pennsylvania Society, which isn't inaugurated until 1899? 20 years after his death. How do you not question things like that if you're looking at it? I don't know. So anyway, that's the amazing story of William Hepworth Dixon and his biography of William Penn. And, I was thinking I was going to do a lot more on William Penn, but I think I'm just going to move on and move away. I'm sure I'll get back to William Penn someday because, of course, these stories all still connect, but I do want to get back to the Brothers Poe and what's going to happen over in Ireland with the carols and the mythology and everything. Oh, I'm so excited about it. Right, so, but to top this one off, I do have a small cherry for this one too, again, regarding these crazy dates. Earlier I was talking about Mendez Cohen, chairman of the Calvert Papers Committee and everything, right? And he's a really amazing, amazing character. And he's going to get an episode all on his own. He plays a big part in things here in Maryland in the mid-1800s and for the Zionist movement especially. But I'm just not there yet. But he's going to get special treatment, no doubt about it, right? And so the address that he gives for these Calvert Papers happened on December 10th, 1888. But he died on May 7th, 1879 as well. So how? How could he have given this address on the Calvert Papers if he died? I thought, well, did he have a kid? Is there like a Mendez Jr.? It doesn't say anything about him marrying or children here. I don't know. Just still more wonkiness with the dates. Right? And I realized that I actually have one more cherry to go on this one. And that's when I was looking into Albert Ritchie, the president of the Maryland Historical Society. I found that his son was one Albert Ritchie who was governor of Maryland, right? And so I was just doing a little diligence on him and reading up on him. I see that he was the Attorney General of Maryland, right? And he was preceded by who? Edgar Allan Poe. What? Right? And Edgar Allan Poe, look at him there. All right, Walter Camp's 1894 book, American Football. All right, Attorney General of the state of Maryland from 1911 to 1915. And so he's the second cousin of Poe, twice removed, son of Maryland Attorney General John Prentice Poe. And so now here we actually see the Poe name connected to political positions. Again, reinforcing, sort of underscoring this whole Poe as a hidden political noble bloodline, right? And maybe not so hidden here in the state of Maryland after all, right? And I think it's amazing that he was the quarterback for the very first college football All-America team, all right, where Princeton beats Harvard 41-15, shellacked them. And it's really amazing that in his career, right, he serves as the city solicitor before he gets elected as Attorney General of the state. So we're talking 1910 here, right? It says that he defends an ordinance that would enshrine segregation between blacks and whites in housing. And now this is really amazing as well, getting into that race element, and the racism and the segregation aspect of our history, because that stuff was kind of forced on us later than people want to admit, and it didn't happen until the early 1900s with Woodrow Wilson and some of those people, right? And so interesting that Edgar Allan Poe's second cousin, twice removed, Edgar Allan Poe, would play this kind of part, and especially, with the development of American football. Absolutely amazing. All right. Okay, guys, that's what I have for you on this one. I hope you had fun. I certainly had a blast bringing this one to you. And so remember, just because you don't know the truth doesn't mean you can't have fun with the lies, right? And so until the next one, cheers, guys.